Amy, I'll start with you. You've talked a lot about your work in the video, but from the work you've done with adults, what do you think is the biggest obstacle preventing them from talking to youth about sex?
The majority of the adults that we work with county social workers and CASA workers, but a majority of the adults we're working with are foster parents. And what we are finding is that, one, foster parents aren't necessarily, because they don't expect the youth to be wanting to have that dialogue, that they are apprehensive about initiating it and waiting for the youth to start that. As well as I think somehow the foster parents feel as if they have the discussion, they're then giving the youth license to engage in sex, or they're going to be held liable if something happens, instead of just realizing that this is just a natural conversation and it's a part of the overall health of our youth, not just sexual health.
Amy, you've actually introduced policy that would address the need for sex education in counties across California. So if you can tell us a little bit about that bill and what that would do.
Happy to do it. So we, together with CLC and the Alliance for Children's Rights and Public Counsel, four organizations are working together on a bill called SB 528, and it kind of has to do a lot with what we heard. I mean, specifically, the demographics of foster care have really changed a lot, and I think that partially explains why we're so uncomfortable talking about sex. Foster care used to be a program for young children, and our foster care population has aged. There are more 12 to 18-year-olds now than ever before. And so we are kind of stuck in the past. We still think of kids in foster care as babies and children, and we haven't adapted our practice to recognize that we have young adults, sexually active people, and that's a normative life experience. That's not aberrant. And so SB 528, it has four provisions, but the one I'll mention is saying we can't let this fall through the cracks, that we are legally responsible for the care and custody of children in foster care, and any responsible parent would make sure to have this conversation. The question is, what's the quality of the conversation? It's very hard to legislate that. We can legislate what the child welfare system has to do, but the challenge will be, if it goes forward, how we ensure that it's a quality conversation, that it follows the recommendations that the young people on the program gave us, that it's conducted by someone that they have a relationship with, so they're actually getting good information, they're getting medically accurate information when they need it. So, but it's a first step forward. To try and ensure that all young people starting at age 12 don't just have information about sexual activity, but also their own human sexual development, because that's something that many young people in foster care don't get. And just one last thing I'll say is there was a really interesting survey of California child welfare workers, and they asked them, do you do the talk with the young people on your caseload? And if you don't, who does? And the most frequent response was, I don't. And when they asked, if you don't, who does? The answer was someone else. Which is just very telling that this is really definitely falling through the cracks. So hopefully we can move the ball forward with SB 528, but it's going to require a lot of training and a real change in our practice as a state.
I think one of the things that we have to help young people learn to do is really pay attention to their own feelings and thoughts, to really look inward and know how they're doing. So, and to have some sense of how comfortable am I? Am I rushing into something? To be self-reflective. That's really what I'm talking about. We need to help young people develop the capacity for reflection, so that kind of getting to know yourself. Am I feeling anxious? Am I feeling pressured? Am I really holding back for some reason that I wish I didn't have to? I think that is and to be able to feel that you can talk to the person you're considering having a relationship with or are in a relationship with. People, by and large, we hope, don't just say hello and then immediately have sex. We hope that that this is a gradual process of getting to know the other person and discovering likes, dislikes, not, as Amy was saying, not just in terms of sexuality, but, you know, what kind of movies do you like to see? What do you like to do in the afternoons? And to be able to have an open conversation.
Anita, our birthday girl, you shared in the video that your home didn't focus on sex and it was very sheltered. Even though the adults weren't talking about it, do you think the other youth were, or in your experience with the other youth talking about it? And where do you think, when they were talking about sex, where do you think most of them got information from?
They're like younger than me, a lot younger,
Okay.
and so they weren't talking about sex.
There was an age gap.
Yeah,
Okay. How young were they?
they're like, when I was 10, they're like 5 and 6.
And Conlisha, you had a unique experience as a gay teen in care, much like Tony was talking about. If you can share with us what your experience was like and what you wish you knew that you would share with other youth in care who are figuring out their sexuality. You can use this.
Well, me personally, my foster mother, she was very, I guess you can say homophobic. So she would say things, because my biological mom is actually lesbian, so she would say things to me like, oh, why are you dressing like a boy? You know, are you trying to be are you trying to be a fag like your mom, or and stuff like that. So those statements there made me shut down and close myself off. I didn't come out until I was about 19, and when I was younger, I hadn't even known that I liked the same sex, because that was growing up. That was, that wasn't something you do within that household. So that was just.
So while you're gathering things, there's a book I would like to recommend to everybody in the audience. It's called Sex Without Regret, which is written, it comes out of Youth Communications, which is in New York City. It's 51 things you should ask yourself before you have sex. And this was done with focus groups and in New York City, and it's all written by teens about their thoughts, their experiences, and I've been going through it as I have time, and it's very well done. It's really good resource.
Well, and I was going to say one thing is 2 young people that we've heard from who are gay in foster care both had terrible experiences with their foster parents. And that really speaks to the need for structural change. We have to hold those foster parents accountable for what is emotional abuse.
Right.
And I mean, that is, the fact we don't have some way to hold those foster parents accountable, it's not acceptable, because we're further abusing those young people and we're paying for it with our public money. So I know CYC has a wonderful bill to evaluate caregivers, and hopefully we could get this kind of information. And also the Gay and Lesbian Center in LA has a whole initiative around helping us be more mindful around the needs of LGBTQ young people in foster care. But I mean, it's so, it's really, it's tragic, and it's abusive, and it's child abuse, and that we're all funding. And so that's, I think, an important place to start.
Does your SB 528 address that?
SB 528 is around making sure young people have access to information about sexual development and pregnancy prevention, but it doesn't what is the bill, the CYC bill?
196.
What is it?
8196.
8196 is going to create a work group to create a mechanism where young people can give feedback on the quality of their foster care placement, and to do it in a way where they feel safe to share this kind of derogatory information, statements that are made. Because right now there isn't any quality control. I mean, many foster parents are wonderful, loving people. I don't want to, but they all have to be that. It's 80% is not good enough.
I'll start with these questions from the audience. Dr. Hyman, this is for you. Can you share what kind of therapeutic interventions you employ to help children overcome histories of trauma and abuse?
So Home Within is a national organization. We have therapists who are in private practice seeing current and former foster kids in weekly pro bono psychotherapy. And we're kind of old-fashioned in the sense that we really believe in developing relationships with clients, and that this takes time and to develop trust for the young people and adults to feel as if they want to open up, particularly foster youth who've had a lot of different therapists who were told that the way to treat people is to get them to tell you about their trauma. And so what we really do is do a lot more listening than we do talking, and try to help young people gradually in small doses as they feel comfortable talk about what, not so much just to talk about trauma because it's the right thing to do, but to help them understand how that gets in the way of current relationships and different ways of having relationships.
This is a question for all of you. What age do you feel is appropriate to have the talk?
I think you have there is no such thing as the talk, I think is right. I think it's from the very beginning of life that you're talking about your body and taking care of it and honoring it and other people's bodies. It's when parents are protective of their own bodies and are protecting of their children's bodies and are admiring and loving. So I think it's something, it doesn't just happen at age 12 or 11 or 10. It's from the very beginning. I'd be curious what other people.
Yeah, I think it's starts off from the beginning. Like it would be like even just starting off by if they're a young age, just talking about kissing or relationships with your kids and your other classmates, and just starting off there and just running wild with it after that, and that'll open up a lot of conversation. Like, oh, so how's your friend? Oh, you like him, and or her, whatever it is, and just go from there. I think it can vary with every youth.
So that reminds me of a colleague describing talking to, I think it was a 6th or 7th grader that he was seeing in therapy, and this was a little boy, saying that he kind of had a crush on a girl, and the therapist said to him, you know what's so cool about having a crush? You don't have to do anything. You don't have to kiss, you don't have to hug, you can just have a crush. And so I think having those kinds of conversations from, early on.
Do you guys have an answer for that one? Or?
Well, I think saying too, not treating it as the talk as one big monumental event in your home. That by itself, that by itself
it needs to be gradual.
The stigma and the stress and the anxiety with it. And again, if you're having communications with your youth about their overall health and working in the sexual component when they seem ready for it or have questions about it.
All I would add, I think part of this is tied into kind of our collective fear of adolescent sexuality. I think we're generally frightened of teens, and then teens having sex is like super scary to most grown-ups. And I think a lot of the work has to be done by grown-ups, so how we do that is a big question, but we just want them to not do it, and they're going to do it. Again, it's normal. It's not even, so I think it is embracing it, and you can have a great sexual relationship as a teenager. The goal is to not delay sex as long as you humanly can. It's a healthy sexuality, and I think that so much of our bias comes through when we talk to young people. They really know what we're really trying to tell them is just don't have sex. And I think until we can put that bias on the side burner, I'm not sure how productive our conversations will be. And that's, born out of very legitimate fear that price they could pay if it doesn't go well. And the price is a lot higher for kids in foster care than it is for middle class kids.
This question I'm going to direct to you, Amy. Is it legal to make it mandatory for youth in the home to take birth control? And if they don't, can you remove them or move them?
No, No, I don't, it's not legal to require them to take birth control. So that'd be really, something that would be.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Okay, oh, there's a card. Anyone else have any questions now? You know, hand raise, feel free.
Well, I have a question.
Yeah, oh yeah.
What is the foster parent requiring?
So what if it's a foster parent requiring 7-day notice?
That foster parent should be referred to community care licensing, as well as whatever quality control that county has in place. That's a violation of that youth's personal rights. Now, again, the youth have the right to access to sexual health education as well as treatment, which could include birth control, but it's illegal to make anybody take any medication. So you.
That's what I thought, that it's legal, but if I don't, then it's down.
Right. So, and I think that, you know, in that instance, that's tragic. I think it's,
And it's not for every youth.
right. Without knowing the entire situation, I would say relatively comfortably that foster parents should not be fostering. And again, that's a violation of the youth in that person's home personal right, and community care licensing should be notified immediately. And with that, and I think what's unfortunate about that is that unfortunately you can't change that foster parent's, you know, mind. Maybe with education, that foster parent would back off that stance. So unfortunately, it may result or could result in a placement change, which I realize it's not desirable. But maybe it is. Yeah, or maybe it's desirable.
Maybe that's not
maybe
that's
right.
not a good match for
Yeah,
them, you
no,
know?
no, absolutely. And I think that it would, I am not aware of what county this is going on in, but I can guarantee you the child's attorney would want to know that immediately, and as with the court, quite frankly.
Sounds like you guys should talk a little later as well. Okay, Tussie.
Yeah, I had a question just based off of what I was hearing Tony say in the video. So like when you have foster parents that are become completely overwhelmed with like emergency placements and the physical and emotional and the mental abuse that a foster youth may have endured before coming to their house, how do you or what do we need to do to ensure that the parents also take sexuality as a topic of importance? Because given all the other things that may be on the slate or coming in with that child, sexuality may not be considered important to them. So what do we need to do to ensure that that jumps to the top of the list as well?
I would say keep having this conversation. You know, I mean, for those of us who've been working in child welfare for a while, 5-6 years ago, no one was talking about school of origin, or nobody was talking about education needs. And we were having this discussion, legislation was coming forward, and now it's on top of all of our brains. So I think it's really just continuing to have the conversation. Once we get to the point where our bench officers are educated, social workers, the foster family agency workers, everyone's having this talk over and over and over again, then it helps to rise to kind of, you know, a higher level of need for the foster parents. And it's not to suggest that they aren't overwhelmed, and I appreciate that, you know, a caregiver is faced with a lot of needs, you know, all at one time. But hopefully when the information is presented that this is a crucial component of this child's life, and if in fact the foster youth is not equipped or able to have that dialogue, there's someone else on that team doing so. But I think us having this talk is what we need to do statewide.
Even also, even just the county welfare workers, even having that conversation with the parents so that they know, you know, raising awareness not just within our system, but within the families.
There's a new web series coming out, so they should watch the web series.
So, Amy, I'm totally blown away that you talked about not delaying sex till as old as humanly possible. That seems so deeply controversial to me and awesome. And what I'm thinking of is that is in your legislation, is there anything about sexual pleasure? Because I think for so many foster youth who come into care from traumatized backgrounds, if they actually have an empowered sense of sexuality, it is a really fabulous thing for them to have. And But what happens so often when we talk about sex education is we talk about pregnancy, we talk about disease, we talk about violence. For the boys, we'll talk about ejaculation. In the San Francisco School District, they didn't even have the word orgasm in their curriculum up until not too long ago, and maybe never. And certainly they didn't use the word clitoris. So I'm wondering if, how, now that AB 12 is here and youth are going to be maybe in foster homes till 21 and so forth, can we move this dialogue into also talking about sexual empowerment? And I say that as a feminist who's concerned about all the other things people are talking about, but.
No, I'm with you. I mean, I think that's kind of, we're at an earlier stage, but that's where we need to go. And I mean, that's the kicker for me. My very first job in child welfare was at a Crittenton home, all with parenting young people. And so, I mean, they often had they'd gotten pregnant, they'd become custodial parents. And it's not like they had these great sex lives.
Right.
Like the sex they had was not even that great. And it just really is not just not that great, it was like often not good at all, like in terms of marginal, doing it because a man felt that to keep them or not even voluntary. And so we're so far away, I think, in empowering young women around if they want to have sex, how they can have sex that is pleasurable. We're really far away from that, and it's so taboo, you know, and but that's where we need to go, because I think it empowers women to make better choices and just to be happier in the choices they make, you know, because they bear the brunt of this when they get pregnant, when they don't want, and almost all young people, there's a great study out of Chicago, almost all young people in foster care who get pregnant may keep the child. It's like 3% terminate, which, you know, for whatever reason, that's is what it is, but I mean, the price is very high, and so I think you raise a really interesting point, but we're not even at the beginning of that conversation, because and I hope that SB 528, when it moves forward, the curriculum that follows it isn't just about sex is scary and sex is bad, and we need to train social workers and foster parents and judges and attorneys how to convince kids not to have sex, because that's really not the point. It's about sexuality in a larger sense. But the devil's in the details. I mean, legislation is a very blunt instrument, and it's why we have a social work practice that couples, you know, with legal practice and child welfare, and hopefully they come together and create something good. But it's hard to get, you know, that through in legislation.
In one of my sex education classes in like the 9th grade, they would talk about masturbation, and they like educated us about self-pleasure and stuff. But I'm like trying to imagine, like in a foster home, I don't think the foster parents would be very happy with masturbating foster children. How would like that happen? Or it seems kind of weird.
I think that's a good point, and I think I want to extend on your question, because I think talking about sexual empowerment would be leaps and bounds beyond like just talking about sex. And I think for this conversation, how religion and just moral beliefs plays a big role in this as well. So if we can't even get people to talk about sex because they may not want adolescents to be doing it at all, forget empowerment. Like, how do we even get over talking about it and giving them all of the information so that that young people can be informed? Because I think that's a big part of this as well.
So I think what you were saying, both of you were saying, that we've sort of split out sex education. You know, we're just going to talk about doing it. That's it. Or more importantly, not doing it. You know, and so that's why we have these scare tactics. You know, these horrible things are going to happen to you, and that we really have to think differently about adults educating young people about relationships and the importance of loving relationships. And if you are teaching people about loving relationships, you don't talk to people the way your foster mother was talking to you, and you don't treat people the way you have been treated by foster parents. So we really have to do a much better job of making people aware of words hurt people, actions hurt people. We need to be able to think about treating children and pleasure, but I think, you know, to go from where we are to there, unfortunately, I think we're gonna have to work our way up. And I think we just have to keep putting the materials out there, we have to keep educating people, and, you know, we educate the people who are most willing to listen first. And let that, you know, we just gotta keep doing it.
Should, talking about sex with,
Right, thank you.
okay, should talking about sex with foster youth differ from talking about sex with all youth, and if so, how?
I think talking about sex with youth who have been traumatized is different from talking to youth who have not been traumatized about sex and about relationships. So I'm not sure that it's particular to foster youth. I think it has to do with sort of the background of relationships that this is landing on. So that we know that people who have been well treated expect to be treated well, and people who have not been well treated do not expect to be treated well. So I think that really has to be in the context of what the history's been.
Any other questions? Yes.
I have a question. Just to piggyback on what Jamie, I guess I'm a little confused. I mean, I'm 23 and I'm a former foster youth, right? But why would you not include in the sex conversation? Why would you not include that it is pleasurable and that it's okay that it's okay that it feels good? Like, to me, like, the whole point of having sex is so that it feels good. Like, I mean, you know, to me, I would think that was the reason that you're having sex, is because it feels good. So I'm not,
Why neglect that?
why neglect that aspect?
Scare you to make you not do it.
But they're gonna do it anyway.
Right. Right.
So why not include it? Yes, it's good that it feels good. Yes, it's good that you enjoy it. I'm all for that. But just be responsible with your actions. Why would that not be? I guess why would that not be more so the focus of the conversation versus it's bad, you're gonna get pregnant, you're gonna get AIDS, don't do it.
I would agree. I agree with your stance. I think we're in a position though where we're chasing after the problem. So we're not starting from a place where we can just blanketly give out the information. Because in that instance, then yeah, absolutely we have the opportunity to give out the pros and what's going on with it. But I know from our standpoint, we're dealing with youth who are already parenting, and how are we keeping their babies out of the system? So we're dealing with that issue. And then we're dealing with youth who have been, you know, exploited or violated. So we're dealing with that issue. And so I think until we can catch up with what's going on, and unfortunately, I think we're really far behind it. We're chasing, you know, really, really far away from it. That's why I think.
I think that was alluded to, Ryan, you made the allusion to religion as, you know, religious foster parents getting a calling and going into this largely for religious purposes. I know that when we did the first story on this, I talked to Rick Bars, who's one of the preeminent guys doing this work out of the University of Maryland, and he was saying that religion is a really big barrier, and you know, and to what degree, how do you start dealing with that issue? I'm wondering what people have seen. Also, Ryan, you've done some reporting on it, but I'm just wondering where that plays into the whole thing. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think it's big. I mean, this comment I'm drawing on my experience from First Place. You know, the LGBTQ young people we had a lot of just resistance to that. I mean, I would say specifically, kind of almost all of our young people were African. Be a successful, happy, gay adult, and so I think the religion part for gay youth is, I think, even stronger than just general adolescent sexuality. I'll just throw that one out there if anyone wants to fill in the blanks there. That was just something we had a lot of conversations about at First Place.